Good afternoon and welcome to the Nfhs Media Availability Session. This afternoon, we're pleased to have all of you join us with our Executive Director, Dr. Karissa Niehoff. The Nfhs is the national organization for high school athletics and performing arts programs located here in Indianapolis. And we serve our 51 state high school associations and more than 19,500 high schools and more than 12 million student participants. For the 101, now 102 2 years of our organization, writing playing rules for high school sports for boys and girls has been our main program that we've been involved with. And now we're involved in offering online education courses for coaches, officials, parents, students, and others to ensure that our students have healthy participation, achievement, and good sportsmanship. So we're excited to have you here with us today. Just a few housekeeping things to get started. This session may be recorded, and that will be recording will be available at the conclusion upon request. And live streaming of Zoom windows is permitted. And while we are involved in opening up our session today, introducing our topics, as you think of questions, please place those in the Q&A, and we will direct those to Dr. Niehoff at the when she concludes the opening part of her session here. The topics today, as you know, the issue of name, image, and likeness at the collegiate level has been a major topic, particularly since July 1st with the NCAA coming on board and ruling. And so naturally, there's been a question about how those NIL issues address high school sports. And we, Dr. Niehoff addressed that in the Nfhs Voice last week, and she's going to expand on that today as we look at that issue. Also, the softball high school rules changes that address culture and religion. Those were released this morning, and she will be addressing those as well. And today we're kicking off our Title IX at 50 celebration campaign, a year-long celebration that will conclude next June with the 50th anniversary of the passage of Title IX. So those are the three topics for our session here today. We're pleased to have all of you with us. Again, my name is Bruce Howard. I'm Director of the Publications and Communications with the Nfhs. Chris Boone, our Assistant Director, will be addressing any questions that you have to Dr. Niehoff when we're concluded today. And with us also is Cody Porter, our Manager of Media Relations, and Nate Perry, the Coordinator of Media Relations, who will be assisting with the Q&A and streaming some of these questions and answers today. So at this time, I want to turn it over to the Executive Director of the Nfhs, Dr. Karissa Niehoff.
Well, Bruce, thank you. And on behalf of everyone at the Nfhs, welcome. You may have seen in one of the first slides that we had 4 topics listed. 3 are content and 1 is a thank you. So the first topic to address is just on behalf of all of us. We want to thank you in the media profession for all that you do. We are sincere friends and supporters and very grateful that, especially for the last 16 months, you have kept our stories on the forefront. You've kept our communication channels open and helped us to get messages out there to people nationally as quickly as possible. So we are very grateful for all that you do. The 3 topics that we really wanted to dive into in terms of content are name, image, and likeness, the softball rules changes, and really softball being reflective of other sports that have moved in this direction, and then of course Title IX. So starting with name, image, and likeness, there are 6 major talking points that we wanted to put in front of you from, again, the high school perspective that are relative to all of this energy around name, image, and likeness. The first point is that the legislation that we are seeing being passed or in motion do not speak to high schools. So there is some confusion about when NIL activity might kick in, but right now we do not have legislation that says high school student athletes are able to engage in contracts and such that pertain to name, image, and likeness. So hopefully there's no confusion there. And certainly if you have questions about that, ask us now or certainly contact us in the future. But one of the other talking points is that we want to really carve out the high school population and high school participation as different from collegiate. So participation in high school athletics really truly is a privilege. It's a piece of the overall educational experience. And another point being that the mission and purpose of high school participation is a little bit different from collegiate. We have well over 95% of our high school student athletes that will not enter into collegiate competitive experience. So we look at high school opportunities as really based on a focus on learning, engaging with teams, perhaps for the first time, coming into contact with that significant adult or more in terms of influence, looking at the focus on life lessons and skills and attributes that will carry on beyond high school into a young person's life. We're not looking at high school athletics as a pathway to elite participation. So we know that collegiate student athletes have already been identified as more talented, a little bit more of an elite focus, and also for the most part over the age of 18. So they're adults that can make their own decisions. So we want to make sure that our conversation at the Nfhs about name, image, and likeness is very centered on who our kids are and the purpose for the activities that we provide for them. We also want to look at the influence of name, image, and likeness on the recruiting process. We are extremely concerned that if NIL opportunities are available to high school age kids, it can be a real detractor from a healthy recruiting experience, one that might involve direct connection between the high school coach, between a particular school of interest, the coaches at that particular program, and the family in general. We're concerned that if high school students are if something shiny in the way of an NIL contract is before them, it can really detract from a student's decision about where they want to go in their next phase, what's the best school for them. We don't want agents representing contracts to be the lead influencer. Now, we don't have our head in the sand. We know that we have high school students, that age group, that are extremely talented and they're very successful, probably in club programs, depending on the sport, whether it's a club volleyball or an AAU basketball or Legion baseball. And there are probably relationships with agents already taking place. But we know that that represents the very few in our high school populations. So we're concerned that if NIL is the first contact for a young person and their family, that it can really disrupt the healthy academic decision-making process as well as the healthy recruiting process, which we hope takes place between the high school coach and the collegiate program. Another concern we have around recruitment is high school eligibility. Right now, our 51 state associations have regulations and bylaws in place that protect amateurism, that don't allow for kids to be paid for their identity as a high school student athlete, wearing that high school jersey. We want to protect that. We do not want kids to be benefiting from name, image, and likeness as it pertains to their high school student athlete identity. Again, if there are club programs that fall outside of state association regulations and bylaws, that may be existing. But when it comes to the actual high school locker room experience, the culture of the school community, the culture of the school locker room, and all that is unique about high school sports, we believe that professional contracts could be a real disruptor in terms of how all of the kids feel all of the families feel, how that high school community feels, where one or more student athletes are identified as more elite and, in fact, quite frankly, identified as professionals. We don't believe that's appropriate. So, and finally, we really are concerned that NIL benefits for high school student athletes could exacerbate a lot of inequities that exist. Right now, we know that the sports of football, basketball, perhaps a handful of opportunities in other sports exist. We believe that if high school student athletes can benefit professionally from their name, image, and likeness relative to the actual high school that they're playing at, we think that this will exacerbate inequities across sports, inequities across gender opportunity, and certainly inequities when it comes to communities where resources might be different. So some of our better served communities from a fiscal perspective, some of these kids already have access to opportunities to better themselves, get noticed, attend camps year round, specialize, perhaps be identified sooner. We're concerned that some of these inequities would be exacerbated. So when it comes to NIL, we have some major points of concern that are different from college and really are points that we want to protect with our 51 associations that have asked us to be a leading voice as we get into this business of athletes benefiting from name, image, and likeness. The second point or topic of conversation for today's media session is recent changes to our softball rules. As you may know, there are some high-profile media cases that centered around the wearing of beads in the hair. Our softball rules committee has met. They met June 14th through 16th. They did consider some of the rules that were in place, and now we have two particular rules that have changed. In softball rule 325B, language that previously prohibited hard items to be worn in the hair, and it's specifically named beads, that language has been removed. So now beads can be worn in the hair. And then we also had 3-2-5C, which address head coverings worn for religious reasons. Now there will no longer be a requirement that there is prior approval from the State High School Association in order to wear religious headwear, such as a hijab. So softball now has become a sport that has joined basketball, volleyball, field hockey, soccer, and spirit when it comes to changes in rules for headwear or beads. Swimming and diving has actually approved the wearing of full body swimwear without prior approval from the state association. We believe that the Nfhs, in doing this through our rules committee process, is number one, honoring a process that is member driven, that's existed for as long as we have been in existence, for 102 years, and now is really appreciating the beautiful diversity that we are seeing expand across our high schools, the kids that engage in our activities, and now rules that can not only protect the integrity of a sport from its original intent for how it's played, continuing to protect kids from a health and safety perspective, but now be more sensitive and more embracing of who our kids are from an identity perspective. So we're pleased that our rules committees, as they're meeting, are being considerate of cultural and religious identity. The third topic that we wanted to put before you today is Title IX. So this is something we're super excited about. I have a new pin that I'm wearing on my lapel that we released at our recently concluded summer meeting. We had our summer meeting through July 2nd recently, and we had our closing session, which involved a fireside chat between myself and Leslie Vissers. So from a media community perspective, certainly she is most appropriate to have on stage to talk about her own journey as well as the journey of women and what the media experience has been since 1972. But we did a big reveal with some rally towels and some pins. The NFHS is kicking off a year-long celebration of Title IX and its 50th anniversary. So we have a number of things that we will be doing starting today, as a matter of fact. And we have a big release about that. But we are on the NFHS website. We are creating a specific page that captures our Title IX celebration and educational information, links to all sorts of things that we have going on. We have on the webpage a timeline of historic events and key influencers. We will be featuring what we're calling moments of magnitude that we are getting from our state associations who are sharing stories with us about significant events that have happened. We are also featuring trailblazers, so key people that have been significant in advancing Title IX and being real champions about all that Title IX has done when it comes to equity of opportunity. Becky Oakes, who is one of the NFHS pioneers and influencers and key leaders, I believe is on this webinar. So we do have to say, Becky, thank you for being one of our trailblazers and giving us many moments of magnitude through your own efforts in your own career. We have developed a Title IX course, which will be on the NFHS Learning Center, something that can be accessed for free, that talks a lot about the legislation itself, what it has done, what it is and what it isn't when it comes to changing legislation and how it speaks to the federal law as it applies to educational institutions that receive federal funding. It goes into the different points, the tests that anyone can use to measure their policies and their bylaws with respect to Title IX compliance. We are developing a toolkit that will be sent to state associations and weekly media posts that can be push to post particular to a state association. Certainly the media can use these things. We are happy to share. We will, throughout the course of the year, be having a number of educational resources available for sharing, webinars and opportunities for collaboration within the Federation family, engagement with the media, and of course, we have embarked on collaborative relationships with other organizations such as the Women's Sports Foundation, national governing bodies, the USOPC, and of course, state associations. So we are excited about the relationships that we're strengthening and a lot of ways for us to celebrate all that Title IX is, its mission and purpose, and its impact. So we are thrilled that we can share that with you today and look forward to working with you in particular, the media family, as we celebrate Title IX and all it's done for young girls and women in sports. So those are our three topics of conversation for today. Again, name, image, and likeness from a high school perspective, rules changes in softball that actually are now in alignment with 7 other committees, and of course, the launch of our Title IX celebration. So very quickly, we wanted to introduce those to you and happy to entertain any questions specific to the high school ecosystem and the landscape that you may have.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Niehoff, for that opening. And as she mentioned, this is your opportunity to ask a question on those topics. Feel free to put those in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen here, and we'll get to those as we have time. We do have one question regarding name, image, and likeness. If a high school student who excels in music or theater is free to make money on the side through NIL opportunities and participate in the school band or school musical, what's the argument against athletes doing the same?
That's a great question. So right now, our state associations, about half of our state associations also have some form of regulatory oversight over speech, debate, music, theater, performing and fine arts areas. Half of our state associations are strictly athletic. So within their bylaws and regulations, there are requirements that student athletes, under any of the activities that they oversee, participate as amateurs. So if a particular association has band under their auspices and school bands go and compete, there could be language that says this musician cannot receive financial benefit or remuneration, perhaps beyond travel expenses. But right now, student athletes, student participants are not able to receive payment when they are engaged in activities while wearing the uniform of the school. The difference is when they have talent and they go out and compete as their own self. So we know that young people have followings. They have TikTok exposure. They have social media platforms. They're entrepreneurs. But what we do not want to see is that they are professionals or benefiting financially while they're wearing the uniform of the school. So there's a difference there. So I do not personally know of individual musicians that earn money while wearing the high school uniform. That's what we are discouraging. If they go out and give music lessons and that's who they are and they're earning money as a high school person teaching music, fantastic. But the money that they're receiving is likely not because they are teaching music while wearing the band uniform. And that's where we really want to carve out a pretty strong line, that it's not the young person that's their job, that's their business. It is the young person who's a member of the band or the orchestra. Likewise, a member of the school team. I hope that helps to clarify.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Continuing on the NIL topic. If a high school student makes money on their name, image, and likeness with a club sport, or if the state approves it for high school athletics at some point, would there be any initial eligibility issues for them with NCAA amateurism requirement?
Well, there could be a mess. Absolutely, there could be a lot of issues. What we are concerned about is if state legislatures start to pass laws that now speak specifically to high school student athletes. And if our concern is that the decisions would be made by legislators as opposed to educators, the people that actually do the work in high schools and do the work of high school athletics. Legislators aren't the people that do that. And we believe should not be making those decisions without being thoroughly informed about the business of high school sports and thinking this through. We are not college and we are not the NCAA. We are schools and we offer activities designed to teach, designed to engage. For a lot of kids, perhaps the first time. We're designed to coach and offer experiences that are the second half of the whole school day, the whole school experience. We are not about elitism. So our concern would be that if a state legislature says, okay, high schools, you can earn money now. As a high school student athlete wearing the jersey of your school, there would be major conflicts with right now what are current state association bylaws that don't allow it anywhere. So state law would create huge conflicts when it comes to NCAA prospective student athlete eligibility. And this is where there's probably the confusion about where high school kids can engage in NIL conversations. High schoolers are prospective collegiate student athletes. Right now we have recruiting laws that the NCAA has in place. They do not want NIL conversations to be an incentive in the recruiting process. So example, we don't want an NIL agent who represents, let's say, a large shoe company to come in and work with high school kids and say, I'm first in line in your recruiting conversations with your family. I represent said shoe company. I will get you to a school that is also that particular shoe contract. However, if you go to another school that's a different shoe contract, I can't really help you there, or I can't do as much for you there. That sort of type of conversation completely disrupts consideration of the best chosen academic pathway. It could disrupt the conversation between high school coach, college coach, the best fit in terms of the athlete development in the sport, which has nothing to do with money, nothing. If a student athlete in high school is that good that they can play in college, the recruiting experience really needs to be about further development based on that young person's prowess, their personality, what kind of coaching style clicks, what the team environment is in the place that they're going. Is it D1, 2, or 3? What the best developmental pathway will be that's the most seamless it can be. College sports, and as a former D1 athlete, I will tell you, it is vastly different than high school. So if we help our kids go from high school to college, and we want to do the best we can, it has nothing to do with money, nothing. And if NIL becomes an influencer in that decision before the recruitment process that is healthy, we are extremely concerned. And right now, with NCAA recruiting guidelines in place, NIL is not supposed to influence that process. So it could be a mess. So we want some authenticity there. We want a lot of education in place. And we want to make sure that high school kids know, yes, you are prospective student athletes, but NIL is not something that is okay to lead the way in your decisions.
Thank you. Yeah. You've kind of touched on this a little bit, but the question was, is there a legitimate feeling inside the Nfhs that name, image, and likeness could one day reach the high school level? And as a follow-up, through our research of this topic, are there any positives that we've found from name, image, and likeness legislation at the high school level?
So, again, we are well aware that kids in the high school age group, there are some, a small few, that are so elite, they're already on radars that are outside of the high school environment. They're playing club ball. They're already recruited, really from middle school age on up. They're engaged with agents. We know that they are third-party kids. So probably their pathway is outside of a member high school experience. They are that talented. They're playing year round. We'll use the sport of basketball. They're on an AAU club or they're attending a private school that has built a team of the best kids. And they already have opportunities to play almost semi-pro, where they have financial opportunities there. So it's already happening in the high school age group. It's a small few. We are concerned, again, that this becomes commonplace for public high schools or our member state association high schools, which affect all of the kids. We don't want that small few to disrupt the culture and chemistry of the locker room. And, if those elite kids can play somewhere that can advance their elite status, get them into the D1 locker rooms and in front of the right coaches, probably even potentially semi-pro before they go to college, there's a pathway for those kids. So the reality is it's already happening. We are just, again, trying to protect the environment that is ours and the rest of the high school population and high school sports as a unique landscape that it is.
Thank you. Yeah, switching gears now to the softball rules changes. The rules change regarding hard items and hair beads seems to be reactive in the sense that it came after a publicized incident involving a student. What steps, if any, is the NFHS taking to be proactive in ensuring that all rules are culturally sensitive before future incidences might play out?
Yep, great question. Appreciate it. So our rules, first and foremost, are developed through a process that is membership driven. So each of the sports that we write rules for is a rules committee. Each of our 8 sections across the country is an opportunity to place people on that committee. We have coaches on the committees. We have officials on the committees. We have other consultants that might sit on the committee, and sometimes even representatives from national governing bodies. So we have a process that invites feedback on an annual basis through surveys that go nationally. Our rules committee digests things that have come in from those surveys. They weigh those requests or the comments against a number of different parameters. They make decisions. They send their committee recommendations to the Rules Review Committee, which is made up of the NFHS directors. And then the directors send recommendations on to the overall NFHS Board of Directors. So rules changes are not made by NFHS staff. It's a membership process, and it is highly vetted. The rules themselves are designed to protect the integrity of the sport. So the way it was meant to be played. At the same time, it's meant to protect the health and safety of participants. So this particular rule, for example, hard objects in the hair. In a sport like softball or another sport where there might be a helmet, we don't want anything in the hair to compromise the fit of a helmet. We certainly wouldn't want a bead to be sort of an accelerator or an intensifier of a hit to the head. So when you think of the neutral lenses, which are twofold, risk minimization and integrity of the sport, those two lenses kind of are the overarching priorities. That being said, we know that we have many more wonderful identities that are religious and cultural, and these kids are bringing their identities to our sports and our activities. So I think what we are doing as the NFHS now, and we're seeing this as our rules committees are meeting, they're taking a look at previous rules and they're asking themselves, do we have data that supports maintaining this rule, such as beads in the hair, data being injury data or not? And then we're looking at would prohibiting beads or religious headwear compromise a young person's identity? If it doesn't compromise the fit of a helmet, doesn't compromise the health and safety of self or other engaged in competitive acts, then let's take a look at those rules. And our rules committees so far have been rolling in that direction of opening up and being more culturally sensitive out of the gate. So I think we'll start to see some of our long-standing rules now being more considerate of culture. And I think as the rules changes happen, training changes will happen. So in our coursework, in our training with officials, we're going to start to help to educate people about how to implement rules. And if there is a rule related to culture or identity, and there's a concern on the field of play, that our officials are better equipped to have conversations, that our ADs are best equipped to handle conversations, to know in advance what to do, and who to talk to, and how to communicate with the state associations. So hopefully we will never again see situations where a young person is embarrassed, where a family is hurt, and where there, is an explosion in the media about situations that maybe could have been handled a little differently that are rooted in culture and ethnicity. So I think we're seeing a shift in rules, in education, in sensitivity, in a direction that is more welcoming and embracing of all young people.
Very good. Thank you. Moving back to name, image, and likeness, there's a couple questions here that kind of touch on the same thing. I'm going to kind of combine them here. But say an athlete signed a NIL deal through a AAU basketball team and then tried to play in that same sport or another sport. Is there a way to block that? Essentially, a high school athlete, would they be allowed to pursue NIL opportunities as long as they're not wearing school affiliating gear?
Yeah, so obviously, if they engage in that through an AAU program, as the example in the question, they can go ahead and do that. The problem would be is if they also wanted to play for their high school team. So now they would be a young person that is bringing a professional relationship to the high school program. There would need to be a very clear separation. The high school young person cannot in any way, shape, or form bring a professional identity to the high school environment. So I can't speak for specific state association bylaws, as they can look slightly different, but this would be a professional young person who, and I would assume if they're playing in an AAU program, it's year round. And if they're getting paid to do it, they're likely not going to be able to also play for their high school team at the same time that they are functioning as a professional athlete. But again, we'd have to look at each state association bylaws for the nuances there.
Very good. Yeah. Just following up on that, what are some tips for administrators in schools to deal with the recruitment of high school or high profile athletes, in their schools as it relates to NIL?
Yeah, so fantastic question. I think the first question would be who's talking to our kids? So if you are an administrator and you learn that one of your students is caught up in an NIL relationship, well, with whom? And are they talking about this with a college coach? And are they following appropriate recruitment protocols into college? If so, talk to your high school coach, talk to the young person and their family, find out with whom they're engaged and what kind of NIL conversation is being had. If this is a young person, their family, and somebody's talking to them as an agent representing a contract, a company, and they're saying to your young person, I can get you into school and I can also get you financial benefits, that should raise a lot of flags. And the first thing that a school administrator should do is dig into that conversation, find out what's being said, who's the family engaging with, and if there is university mention, find out the contact point in that university to make sure, number one, there are no recruiting violations. Number two, there are no high school eligibility violations. And number three, that they're being given appropriate information and that they're being educated about this. If a high school student and their family has an NIL opportunity in front of them, and it's a contract for hundreds of thousands of dollars to sign with a shoe company or apparel or whatever it is, there needs to be very clear understanding about what this is and what's the exit strategy. So what happens when the young person's injured? How long is this contract? Is this contract going to interfere with collegiate if they go to a school? It's a Nike contract, Adidas school. What does that look like? And then even if they go on to play in the pros, are we talking 10 years? And then are you going to need attorneys to be involved in contract exit? If you have a contract and you're being paid to play, what's the tax situation? What is your, if you play in 15 different states as a professional athlete, do you pay taxes in 15 different states? I mean, there are a lot of fiscal complexities. There are a lot of eligibility complexities. So as an administrator, just to, get out of the rabbit hole I've gone down, but, definitely find out what this communication is about. with whom is your young person talking to, and find out if we're following the rules here in place at the NCAA level, as well as at your state association level.
Very good, thank you. We have no more questions in the Q&A. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in there. I thought we'd kind of maybe wrap up, maybe Dr. Niehoff, with some of your thoughts on the Title IX campaign and how you're looking forward to that this next year.
Well, it's absolutely nice to end on a positive. You know, personally, my first thought is thank you to anyone who might be listening that has been a trailblazer. And if any of you know people who are, please thank them. You will get regular communications from the Nfhs. There'll be a lot of information coming out of our office, the team that's on this call, our publications and communications team, anything from push to post and social media to stories that we've gotten from state associations that will be featured on our website, press releases, webinar opportunities. Again, the Title IX course that's on the Nfhs Learning Center that is helpful when it comes to understanding what the law really is and what it isn't. And then events that we'll have throughout the year that are truly celebratory about what the last 50 years have meant. So a fun fact that demonstrates impact is, in 1972, on June 23rd, when Title IX was signed into law, we had slightly over 300,000 high school age girls participating in athletics. And when you figure we have, let's say, 13 million plus high school age kids, that's a very small percentage. Now we have well over 3.5 million girls who are participating in high school athletics. And that number is increasing every single year. We have work to do. We have a lot of equity issues that are high profile at the collegiate level, the professional level, international level, but we're getting there. And the good news is we have groups and effort that's behind this that's powerful. But Title IX, as you all know, never once mentioned sport. So it really is about access to opportunity for those institutions that receive federal funding. We have seen it and felt it in sport, so we're going to celebrate that, absolutely, and be specific. But we also want to help to educate everyone about paying attention to opportunity, where equity is not necessarily equality, but access is key. So a lot more to come. We're super excited about the year and telling the great stories of so many people that have played a role.
Thank you very much, Karissa. And we are looking forward to this year as we think of all the great events that have occurred in the last 50 years with regards to the expansion of girls in programs. Thank you also for your great comments on NIL. It's an interesting time right now that we're in, and we look forward to days ahead as we deal with this. If you have any questions, if you want to reach out to Dr. Niehoff for any one-on-one type of interviews, she's always open to that. I would suggest that your first contact would be with our manager of media relations, Cody Porter. Reach out to him and he will get you in touch to set up an interview with Dr. Niehoff. We can all be reached here at the NFHS through our emails and our phone numbers here. Those will be available to you in the chat. So we thank you very much for joining us today. Please reach out and let us know if you have any questions. We thank you again, and best wishes for a great week ahead. Thank you very much.